Hi everyone, I'm Victoria and I'm hoping you're here for the four essential elements of balanced parenting. There's been quite a lot of interest in this, but I know not everyone could make it live. So welcome to everyone who is live, but also welcome to the people who are watching this in the replay because I know sometimes you're very busy parents and it's really difficult for you to get to these things. But don't worry, it will all be sent out and you'll be able to access it both here on the page, but also in emails if you are on my emailing list. So that's me. If you don't know me, my name is Victoria, and I'll talk a little bit more about myself later on because I think probably what's more important right now is to actually think about whether you are in the right place or not, and what are you going to get out of watching this workshop. So hopefully it will be useful for you. So I've designed this workshop really for parents who do want to do their best at parenting and be the best parents they can be. So if you're someone who is interested in parenting, maybe you read a lot of parenting books and blogs and likes to know what the latest is, and that's really great. Then this is definitely for you because it'll probably just expand your knowledge, give you some more things to think about, add to your long list of things that are already in your mind about parenting. It's also good if you're just not sure what to do. Perhaps you've got a bit stuck. Maybe you've had a difficult time in your life at the moment and things aren't quite working out and you're not sure what to do next. Or maybe something is happening for your child and there's just some difficulties and you're not sure how best to approach them. Or maybe it's just that you have tried things, but they just haven't worked out. And that can, happen as well. So again, this will hopefully give you some more ideas and thoughts about what you can do. And definitely what you need to be is open-minded if you're here, because I think that the stuff I talk about, none of it is new or completely different, but I think all put together, sometimes people aren't sure about it. But if you've got an open mind, then it'll be really great because you can really hear what I've got to say and then use what you can from it, take what you can away from it, and what doesn't fit, doesn't fit. And that's absolutely okay. I think it's also important to mention who this isn't really for. And this really isn't for anyone who is professional and is looking for professional style of knowledge, like learning all about developmental theory in a kind of very clinical way, because I'm doing this very much for parents. I'm not expecting any prior knowledge. If you have some, that's great. And if you don't, that's absolutely okay. But this isn't going to hit the right level if you're looking for professional sort of knowledge, basically. So it's definitely not for that. And it's not for you if you're not really ready to kind of think outside the box and think about things a little bit differently. So if you're not ready for that, then this is probably not the right place for you. But hopefully, if you've tuned in, then you are ready for that. And so I'll be very excited to tell you a bit more about it. So what I'll talk about today, I'll talk about the three things that really worry me. I see that parents do them or think them, and I always, if I ever hear it, I always go, ooh, I'm a bit worried about that. And it'd probably be helpful to know if that's anything that you come across, or perhaps something sometimes you think, sometimes I do as well. I'll talk about the four essential elements of balanced parenting. So how does this come about is I had to do lots and lots of training and learning about different types of theories and developmental theories. And I noticed that the same four things just seem to come up in sort of evidence about parenting in different approaches and different theories, just the same kind of concept. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized they kind of aligned to each other and balanced each other out. And I thought, well, perhaps they kind of all go together. So this is what this has come from. It's come from the wealth of knowledge that I've gained really over the years and how I've put it together. So it's a slightly different way of thinking about things that you might have come across before. And then there's one extra thing, because there's one little thing that I think really affects whether this works and whether you can have all the knowledge in the world about parenting, but if this one thing is can create some snags, and I'll talk about that after I've talked about the four essentials of balanced parenting. And what I'd really like to say is please do comment on and share. And I'll be trying to get onto the comments there because of the setup I've done, so you can see all the slides. I might not be able to get to content until after the webinar, but I'll be very, very happy to receive any questions. Please do comment and definitely share it, because I really love to share the knowledge that I have with parents to make parents' lives easier. And you never know, the things that you hear today might be someone's missing piece of the puzzle. They might be struggling, and it might be that what I talk about in the webinar today really helps them think about things differently and kind of move on. So please do share it with your parent friends in replay or whatever if you find it helpful, because I think really every parent deserves to have great knowledge about parenting, make their life a little bit easier, really. So just back to myself, I'm Victoria and I'm a trained child psychiatrist, which is a little bit different from a child psychologist. And quite often people do get confused about that. The difference being that it meant that I went to medical school and I had to do quite a lot of training on physical health as well as mental health. So I do have a really holistic approach to things. I can see how the two interact. And really, the training that I've had is very, very broad. So I had to learn a lot about psychological theories, had to learn about sort of social psychology, psychodynamics, all kinds of different things, and learn different types of approaches like behavioral ones and even more unusual ones like nonviolent resistance. And if you know me, you'll know that I'm completely obsessed with it and I use it all the time for my daughter, actually. So I have had quite a sort of broad training. I've been working as a child psychiatrist since 2010 with children of all different ages. They're more recently focusing on teenagers. And I'm still a practicing child psychiatrist now. I work as a child psychiatrist at the moment, alongside being, working in Emerging Parent. And obviously, I'm the founder of Emerging Parent. And the reason I did it was because when I had my daughter, I started to use a lot of the stuff that I had learned during my training as a parent. And I often found that I couldn't, those sort of little bits that I picked up from different theories and different approaches, I was using them, but certainly other parents that I met had no idea about them. And I thought, well, that's a bit unfair. Why should this knowledge be locked away? So I wanted to share all the kind of really useful things that I'd come across with any parents who are interested in listening. And that's why I set up Emerging Parent. And as you can see, I'm not just a professional, I am a mummy. And this is now taken quite a long time ago because my daughter is in primary school now. But as you can see, I wasn't very happy at this point in time because I did have the most terrible postnatal depression when I had her, which was unfortunately undiagnosed. So I do really understand what it's like to feel really stuck, to feel like things aren't going to get better, and to feel like you really don't know what you're doing when it comes to parenting. Because certainly when I was feeling very low, I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing at all, despite, all the kind of training and the knowledge that I had. And of course, knowledge is one thing, but practice is another. And I think it's really nice to combine the two. And having my own daughters really helped me combine the two, which I think has been kind of really great. But thankfully, that was quite a long time ago now. And now I combine lots of different things. So as I said, I work clinically. I do things for Emerging Parent. I also do some volunteering for a perinatal charity supporting people with perinatal mental health difficulties. And of course, I do stuff with my daughter. But there is also, thankfully, a little bit of time in my life for things for myself. So I started to play cello as an adult. So I do that. And I also finally took up dance, which has been my lifelong dream. And I'm finally doing it. So there are different things that I do. And I think if parenting is easier, it's easier to do things outside of it as well. So why I created this, one of the reasons, as I said, is there are three things that I have come across quite frequently with parents, and I sometimes really want to say, well, I don't think that's going to work, or I'm a bit worried about this. Obviously, not everybody wants to hear that advice, but hopefully if you're here, you're open-minded and, ready to listen and to think about where you're at with parenting. And sometimes, I've done these things myself, so, of course that happens. So one of the things I see is sticking to one specific approach. So I think the reason that this doesn't work, well, it can work. Sometimes it works very well. And I see this with things like attachment parenting or sometimes behavioral techniques. People often read a book and it makes loads and loads of sense to them and they go, fantastic, I'm going to do this with my child. And often at first it might work, but then it stops working and it can be quite easy to feel really fed up and upset about that and to feel sort of really stuck. And the reason that doesn't work is because actually you need a whole range of approaches. One of them might work once or for one child, and then you have another child and something different will work, or something will work at one time but will not work at another. And really, it's great to have a really good toolkit to try different things at different times so that you never feel stuck. And I guess that's one of the things that I really love to do through memberships is to give that information out, because obviously I do have a toolkit that's quite robust. There's lots of different things in it, and I can always try lots of different things. You have your favorite tools, but it's nice to have some that you can take out when you need them. Sometimes the approach you use doesn't work at all, and sometimes you end up feeling like something must be very wrong with your child, or you're just not doing it right. And again, that might not be the case. It might be just that it's not the right thing for your child and something else will work very differently. So that always really worries me if someone is, a die-hard fan of one thing and that's what they do, because I think there has to be flexibility, and that's really my approach to it. The second thing that worries me is people who go, well, parenting is completely natural, so it's all going to be okay. There's not going to be any problem with it because it will just come, and the answer will just come. We've been parenting for thousands of years, it'll all be okay. Um, and that worries me because good parenting is natural if you have experienced good parenting. If you have experienced parenting which wasn't very nurturing and which sometimes is very detrimental, unfortunately, sometimes without really wanting to, you can pass those difficulties on to your children. You might not even be fully aware that you're doing it. So, though parenting is natural, your children probably aren't going to die, but you can unfortunately create all sorts of emotional problems and things like that. And in clinical practice, I've seen it lots. So, if a parent tells me that they don't really need to learn anything about parenting because parenting is a natural thing and it'll all be okay, I always think, well, if you've had a great upbringing, that's great. But if you haven't, then it's definitely worth knowing a little bit about parenting so that you can alter things and change things. So that's one of the things that would really worry me. And sometimes it normalizes some stuff that I think is really worrying, because people just see it as natural, whereas actually they're things that you should take action on. And the third thing is kind of the opposite of that, is when someone knows that they've had a very, very difficult upbringing and they do not want that for their kids. And so they just do the opposite. They go, I'm going to do it all differently from my parents. That's it. I'm going to do the exact opposite. And they go kind of really headlong into it. And I think what's really difficult about that is if you've had the upbringing, it's actually quite hard to do it differently. So some things you will be able to do differently, but other things are happening at a level that's really different that you're not even fully accessing. And you need a different kind of support to work with that, because I think that's something that can be really difficult to pick up on. And sometimes you might find yourself doing things that you didn't really want to do, or saying things you didn't want to say, or reacting in ways that seem really at odds with what you're trying to do. So I think if you are in that situation, then really some support is really helpful. And actually, one of the members in my group said just that the reason she likes being in the group was because she had a very difficult upbringing, and this really helps her kind of find her way through bringing up her own children in a different way, because actually it's quite hard to know exactly what to do when you haven't experienced it yourself. So that's the third thing that worries me personally. So now on to the four essentials for balanced parenting. So I've done a little diagram because I'm quite a visual person, so I like to see it. I like to see the icons really to kind of help me remember it. And for me, them being kind of opposite each other really works. So I'll talk through each one and tell you what they are, and then we'll kind of look at the whole thing at the end. So the first thing is the safe base. Now, you might have heard about the safe base. It's something that comes a lot in attachment theory, and that's kind of where I got that word from. But I think it means even more than it does mean attachment theory in real life. So if you have not got a sense of a safe base, so if you don't feel safe in the world, it's really hard to get anywhere. And if you make your children feel that they have a safe base to return to, then they will go further in the world. So they will be able to take more risks. They will be able to do different things, which I think is really fantastic. It's the thing that allows them to go further because they know they can come back. And I think in attachment theory, a lot of the safe base is around, that person, that main attachment figure being that. And that is true to an extent, especially for very little ones. But there's also loads of other ways of, thinking about safe base in terms of the environment and in terms of things like boundaries and framework. So it's not just about, you, the mum or the dad, whoever the main carer is, being the safe base. There are different aspects of the safe base that I think are important to think about. And I think if you can create a safe base for your child, they will be capable of wonderful things. They'll be able to fulfill their potential much more easily because they will feel they can have challenges, be challenged, fail, but they will always have somewhere to come back to. And it's really not just for infants. So often people think about the safe base as something that's part of attachment in babies. And it's part of attachment behavior in babies, returning to a safe base. But actually, we continue to need a safe base throughout your life. And when I did this talk for adults, I talked about how we all need a safe base. Adults need a safe base. It's just that often for adults, it's something internal. It's something we create for ourselves. We don't need other people to create it. But for our children, we need to create it for them. So it's something that is almost, you need to help your child find a way of doing it themselves, towards adulthood really. But in the beginning, you have to do it for them. So it's definitely not just for infants. And I think often people don't think about safe base, in adolescents or sort of school age children, but it's just as relevant. And if children do not have a safe base, and I've seen this in clinical practice, it's really, really hard for them to challenge themselves, to go anywhere, to really, even start to think about who they are, because it's a really important factor. So the second thing is sensitivity, and sensitivity is something that I'm really quite obsessed with. Because there's so much research showing that sensitivity is basically like your superpower as a parent. If you can be sensitive to a child, then attachment is likely to be secure. Your children are likely to have better outcomes generally, both academically and socially. So it's really, really key. And what do I mean by sensitivity? So it's noticing what's happening for the child, but also deciphering the cues, right? So there's the noticing what it is, there's the deciphering what it means, and then there's the appropriate response to them. And I think this is where people sometimes get a little bit confused, because sometimes the noticing and the deciphering happens, but the noticing is almost a bit too acute, or the reaction is, too much for what it is that you have noticed. So there isn't a balance between that. So if you're quite an anxious parent, you might always be on the lookout for things to notice. And that's not sensitivity. Sensitivity, that's more like hypervigilance. And actually in the baby membership, I've done like a little PDF looking at the difference between them, because it can be quite hard to know, especially if you are quite an anxious parent. And if you're hypervigilant, then your child starts to think the world's a really unsafe place. But if you're sensitive and your response is appropriate, then your child feels safer in the world and they feel cared for and loved. So I think that's where sensitivity sometimes doesn't go quite right. But when it does go right, it's really amazing, because it does lead to kind of better emotion regulation and other things as well. There are some things that also decrease your sensitivity, of course, as a parent. So if you're tired all the time, if you're physically or mentally unwell, if you have lots on your mind, you're doing loads of different things and it's hard for you to be present, it's going to affect how sensitive you are to what your child needs. So it's really, really important to look after yourself. One of the things I keep on telling parents is sort out your health, make sure you do get enough sleep if you can. It's very difficult with babies, but do what you need to do, because you're better off having shorter periods where you're sensitive with the child than really lengthy periods where you can't be sensitive because you're too tired, too busy, too much is happening. So actually balancing those things is really, really important. So on to the fourth thing, which you probably can't see because of the video, is boundaries and frameworks is the fourth thing, as a third thing that I'm going to look at. So I've sort of called them that, and I think for me they make a lot of sense. So the boundaries are the things that change. Boundaries are, what you set for your child. When they are, I don't know, just learning to crawl, you're not going to let them go up the stairs, and that's a boundary you set. Obviously, when they're teens, you have very different boundaries. So, boundaries that we set for our children change over time. Frameworks are a bit more like values. So they are the sorts of things you start to instill in your child as they're getting older. So, boundary might be that you aren't allowed, I don't know, to hit children or something, but a framework is going to be around because violence is bad, and you don't accept violence. What is the reason for it? So that's the framework that a framework of thinking that you're starting to set up for your child. And it's much easier to set boundaries when they are related to some kind of internal framework and value, because it makes much more sense to the child. And again, the frameworks help your children be able to set their own boundaries as they get older and into adulthood, where they will need to be doing it themselves, where you're not going to be there to do it. And also having those boundaries, knowing where you are, knowing what's okay and what's not okay, really helps children feel safe. And that's why it's opposite the safe base, really, because I think those two things really work together. So if you have really good boundaries and frameworks, it's part of the safe base. It'll probably make your child feel safer in themselves, like they know where they are. Whereas if boundaries are really lax, or there isn't really a framework attached to them, so you don't know why you're not allowed to do certain things, your child can become quite confused, and it can be quite stressful for them as well, which is, I think, why it's important. I know there are some parents who feel very strongly about being quite relaxed and not being very boundary, because they feel they want to raise their children in that quite expansive way, I guess. And I think it's a very personal choice. I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the one sort of thing that connects all of these, because I think it's important to think about whether that's a good or a bad thing. Sometimes it is good and sometimes it's bad, but it's how do you tell? And the last thing on the four essentials is the nurture. So as you can see, it's opposite sensitivity, because I think you need to be quite sensitive to your child. You need to know what your child likes, what makes sense to them, what they need in order to nurture them, because it's a very, very personal thing. People are nurtured in very, very different ways. And if you get the nurture right, it's much easier to set boundaries. So a child can put up with more almost restrictive boundaries sometimes, if that's what they need. If they are very nurtured, they're more likely to have more respect for you. They're more likely to have respect for your frameworks and boundaries if the nurture is there. And for me, the two always come together. You can't really set loads of boundaries and not nurture, but also if you just nurture and you don't set boundaries, that can also go wrong. So that's why all of these four things are tied, because you can't do one at the most without the other, really. You need to be always thinking about what is the balance between these four things. And I personally think of nurture in sort of four ways, and I've seen this in clinical practice work as well, that there's different ways of nurturing children. It depends where they're at, depends what difficulties they have or what they're more receptive to. But I largely think of them as physical nurture, emotional nurture, cognitive nurture, so helping them develop their mind, really, and also environmental nurture. And again, I go, when I do the full course on the four essentials of balanced parenting, I go through all of those in a bit more depth, because I think it's important to understand that there is all little ways in every single day that you can slip in nurture, which I think is really, a fantastic kind of habit to get into, because the more nurture you do, the more you can do challenging and other things that perhaps are a bit harder. And as children get older, I think parents don't always use nurture in the same way. Whereas actually, even teens can sometimes fall into a place where they really need nurture. I think we just assume they're going to be okay. I think it's really tough, and I think it's really important to keep that going, to keep the nurture going, however old they are, even when they're adults, to be honest. So these are the four things: the safe base, the sensitivity, the boundaries and frameworks, and the nurture. And the way that I see it is that it's almost like you're somewhere in the middle of all of those four. And, one time you might be leaning a bit more towards one, and one time you might be leaning a bit more towards the other. Sometimes your child's going to need a bit more nurture, and sometimes they're going to need a bit more boundaries. Sometimes you're going to need to be very sensitive to them to figure out what it is that's going on for them. And sometimes you're going to be, focusing all your energy on just helping them feel safe where they're at. And you're in all of those things. And the ultimate aim for this, I think, is what is the point of doing this, is that you teach your children how to do it in adulthood. That's why you need to kind of be doing it in starting from when they're very tiny, and then gradually helping them find their own ways of internalizing these things. And that's exactly what I talked about when I talked about this to adults, is that, when we parent ourselves, we also need to be paying attention to these four things. Do we have a safe base? Are we sensitive to our own cues? Do we know what's happening for us? And do we respond appropriately to them, or do we ignore them? Do we have our own boundaries? Do we have values and frameworks that we work from? Are our boundaries set according to that? Are they still right, or are they, old boundaries and frameworks? Do we nurture ourselves? Do we know what we need to nurture ourselves? So we need to get to a place, where children, well, adolescents and young adults can start to do it for themselves with the occasional, help from you. But when they start, they need you to be doing the whole lot themselves, yourself, really. So what's the one extra thing in this all? So all of this is well and good, but there's one thing that can make this easier or harder for you as a parent, depending on who you are. And that thing is authenticity. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is how your own kind of beliefs tie in with what your child needs, because children are different. And some children needs, for example, some children's needs mean that they have to have more boundaries. They just do better when things are planned. They feel safest in that way, and that's what they like. And if you happen to be a parent who is perhaps not into boundaries. And, as I said, you want to perhaps raise a child in a very relaxed way, but they need something else. So you're missing on sensitivity. Maybe you've picked up they need that, but it's really against your grain. You just feel really uncomfortable doing it. Then unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to do this. So you need to have a feel for how those things are for you. Because if you start to feel like you're sensitive to your child and you know what they need and it just feels a bit uncomfortable, just catching yourself thinking, is that because of my own beliefs? Actually, they really do need it and I need to find a way of doing that because that's going to be the right thing for them. So authenticity is really important. And sometimes it is hard and sometimes we almost feel like we're not being authentic to ourselves. But I guess the balance needs to be whether, one of your biggest values is to help your child meet their potential. And if it is, then there's going to be a way you're going to have to find to do the things that maybe on the face of it feel a bit uncomfortable, but are right for your child. So I think authenticity is something important to notice and think about when it comes to these 4 essentials of balanced parenting. So I'm hoping that that has been helpful as an overview. I think the 2 things that I want you to take away from this is there is a lot to know about parenting. I've been, training and working as a child psychiatrist for many, many years now. And I haven't finished. I learn new things all the time. I have parents and memberships asking me stuff, and I go away and read the papers because actually things have changed. There's been new research, or a new theory has come up, and I love to know about all that stuff. So there is always a lot happening, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy going away and finding new stuff out, and coming back to people and sort of talking about it in a way that makes sense. Because sometimes reading research papers can be difficult if that's not what information out there in a way that makes sense to parents. And secondly, I want to take away that things really fluctuate. So if you think about the 4 things, where you're at any given point in time, which one of them is having most of your energy is going to change at different points in time. And that's okay. But sometimes it can be difficult to know because it is such an individual thing. And I think that's why approaches are so tough, because they are quite rigid, whereas actually everything needs to be quite flexible and moving within certain boundaries, maybe, but still to be flexible. And it's so dependent on your circumstances, on whether your child has any difficulties, whether they have any diagnoses, and maybe you're wondering whether something is happening for them, what's happening in the family. There's just so many different factors. And it can be really tough to adjust what you read somewhere or, to your specific situation. And I think that's one of the reasons I created the memberships actually, is because I really wanted to be there to be a place where you can both have some information, that's information, but you can also ask more personal questions. And of course, one of the reasons I'm doing the workshop today is because I'm sort of celebrating the opening of my memberships, because they've been running in a test mode really, and I'm finally opening them up just for these 3 days to get some more members, because I think they're ready to have some new people in them. We've been ironing things out, but I think they are ready. And I really want to provide a space where some more personal questions can get answered, as well as, being up to date with things that are coming out. So I just want to tell you a little bit about them. There's 2 memberships at the moment, one for little ones and one for school-age children, because I think the questions are slightly different. There are some overlaps, but the questions are slightly different. And you can be a member of both if you wanted to be, though most people do choose one to be in. And you get a few things. So first of all, I have got a more in-depth course looking at the 4 essentials of balanced parenting. That's that's just a little overview of the lessons, and there's like a workbook to get through as well, just in a more practical guide going through each of the things. And you also get some other premium courses. So depending on which membership you're in, there's currently one for school-age kids and their emotional well-being, which is super developers. And the It Stops With Me is all about how to stop yourself passing on the difficulties that you might have onto your kids. And it's aimed at parents of smaller children. I'm going to create 2 more courses, one for teenagers and one for preschoolers as well. And those are the bits I haven't quite finished for the membership yet. And also every month there's new material that comes out. So we have 2 lives a month where I answer the questions, where you can put your own personal questions in, and they can be anonymous if you don't want people to know they've come from you. And also I do something else like masterclasses every month, or an extra bit of information that's written and things like that. So there is quite a lot of sort of extra information that comes out every month. They've only been running for sort of 2.5 months, but I'm looking forward to kind of topping up the resources there. And at the moment, because they're not fully complete, I'm offering them for these 3 days for only £17 a month. The price will go up once I've done the extra courses and they've sort of topped up a little bit more. So you can have this membership if you wanted to and be part of developing it and making sure that it's really useful. So far, I've had some really fantastic feedback. I've been asking for feedback over the last week, and it's been really great. People have been finding it really, really helpful. So how does it work? You can click on the link and look at the memberships. I'll put it in the comments and sign up for it. You get an email to access it, and you can access it almost straight away, really. So it's very, very simple. And there's like a link to access a Facebook group. I'm going to put up a little video tomorrow, actually, just giving a little tour of membership so you know what you're getting yourself in for if you fancy it. Just a few questions that people ask. You can cancel membership anytime. You do it yourself. You don't even have to ask me. It's completely autonomous. There are no refunds for the monthly memberships. You just finish the month and then you don't get charged again. If you are paid for a year, then you're refunded for what months you have left. And as I said, the price will increase the next time I open it because I'm hoping to finish the other 2 courses and get a little bit more content in there. So if you do want to grab it for this price, then it is only going to be for these 3 days. It finishes on Friday. Oh, excuse me, I'm still recovering from my awful cold if you've seen my posts. So thank you very much for listening to this. Hopefully you found it useful. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to look at the comments, so I'll go and look at them after I finish this and answer any of them. But hopefully you found that useful, and if you're fancying looking at the membership, please click on the link, check it out. There's lots of information on there. There's some quotes from people who've been in it, so you can see what real people are saying about it. I would really love to have some new members because I think I have some lovely members already, but it'd be really nice to have some new ones come in. Love answering questions and love getting the right information to any parent who really wants to have it and offer the support that you need. So hopefully I will see you all